The propensity is to put everyone who has any kind of negative experience, find the right box to put them in and stick the right label on them. And then we can either chuck medication at them or a course of counseling at them so that we can just sort of move them off and let them sort of start to cope with things. We've got this kind of odd narcissism, I think, about we feel like everyone's observing us all the time and judging us. That's what we're telling ourselves, but it's just not true.
That's the voice of Sean Tucker. And, well, this is a show I've been wanting to make for a fair while now. It's one of the planned specials I talked about when, well, in the UK at least, we were still in T-shirts and shorts. Although today's quite look at this. Hold on, Barney. I'm going to get one of those photographs, F8, hopefully with some sunburst effect on it. Look at this today. Having said that, I don't know. Let me make a sketchbook picture. F8, 550 shutter speed, ISO 160. I'm trying to get some sunburst through the trees here. Beautiful autumnal colours today as well. So, it's a bit warmer than perhaps I'm suggesting in this introduction. But yeah, we were still in T-shirts when I had this idea originally. The nettles had grown as large as triffids. Hogweed was 2 stories high at least. Sabarkalot, you were getting trapped in the brambles, weren't you? And the bindweed was grabbing your feet as you walked through it. So, yes, a while in the waiting, but here it is. This is the week, but already I've had a surge of the very thing we're talking about. The main subject today is like the mental bindweed. This imposter syndrome, or self-doubt. I mean, who am I to even be making a show about imposter syndrome? I don't have a psychology degree, I'm not a counsellor, I'm not a therapist. Ergo, I am or feel like a bit of an imposter really in this space of self-help. Just because I once read a few paragraphs from Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, there's me thinking I can unpick the subjects in the show today with any kind of credibility. I mean, honestly, who do I think I am? My other listener is now nodding. Is it voraciously, furiously, ferociously, voraciously? One of those words. But would you just look at this list that I'm going to tackle head on today with a special guest who's just perfect for this special. But yes, look at this list. This is the list for today's show. Imposter syndrome, that's where we start. And yes, I have a very unhealthy amount of that thing, first recognised by 2 psychologists in the 70s, or perhaps I don't. Because we're going to talk about, well, maybe it's a milder self-doubt that I have. Because we talk or discuss the difference, if there is one, between the two. Then next on the list, confidence, which I'm sure used to be a more plentiful supply when I had hair on my head and could squeeze into jeans with a 28-inch waistband, no probs. Perfectionism. Oh, this one will be interesting. How many times have I told you that the YouTube channel for this show is coming? Well, the films would be there if only I could release the stuff I've recorded in pretty decent supply, actually. But I need to accept that done is better than perfect, and I'm hoping my discussion today may enthuse upon me that notion is correct. Next on the list, inadequacy. That, what am I doing with my life, my career thing? I mean, my other friends, they've all paid their mortgages off. They're so much more successful than me. Comparison anxiety is next on the list, ticking that box. Undervaluing accomplishments. See, on this particular one, there's a fine line, I think, between being just about confident you've done well enough and needing or seeking validation because you can't quite believe your own voice that you're actually doing a half-decent job. And we wrap it all up with fear of failure. On that one, see, my other friends have paid their mortgage off. So this list, I think I can navigate down this list and put a tick in every single one of the boxes. So it's quite the list, and I've brought in a friend to help with this, who I think is a modest master when presented with words, labels, and descriptions on these topics. A decent part of his book, The Meaning in the Making, addresses the list that I think many a creative will have mentally wrestled with. The list, not the book of his, that is. And that's why I'm delighted Sean Tucker is going to be our guiding light as he prompts and inspires thoughts about perfectionism, comparison anxiety, imposter syndrome, and their co-conspirator cousins of emotional toil. And that's made me feel much better about taking on a special that perhaps is one of our most important to date, I think. Along with words from Kim Cofield the other day, one of our very precious extra-milers from Australia land, who said in our monthly Zoom show, Tuesday just gone, "Of course you're qualified to talk about this, Neil. You're human." I will say this, there's some tough love in places today. So it's important to say that if you do feel that some of the subjects, some of the terms discussed are more of a problem than you think you can comfortably deal with day to day, do seek professional help. Because reaching out for support with when you consider tough mental moments that you might be going through, they can make a real and a very palpable difference. We've a lot of ground to cover today with this conversation as we walk together.
Today on the Photo Walk.
Don't think that you have to be a super confident individual who needs to pretend you know everything to cover for imposter syndrome. But when you fail as a photographer, it's just on you. And I think that pressure of being a solo artist of any sort, where you are really sitting in a room alone looking at the work you've made, wondering if it's good enough, you can really get in your head. I wanted to run for the hills because I was not good. I really was not a good communicator. You don't need to worry about how much everyone's thinking about you because they're just thinking about themselves. And I'm more comfortable with who I am now than I was in my 30s. And I was more comfortable then than I was in my 20s. And I know it just takes time now. We should doubt our work if we're trying to be brave with it, I think. Yeah, we have to get out of our own heads, I think, and stop being so mean to ourselves and telling ourselves we're just rubbish and why would anyone talk to me? It's too much. It's overcalibrated. We have to call ourselves on it. Every time you make something good, stop. Make yourself a cup of tea, sit on a chair, go, that was a job well done.
Sean Tucker is my guest today on a special that I've been meaning to make, as I say, for a while now. Welcome along as we make our photo walks together, a show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week. Enjoying the letters, the inspirational stories you've sent in, and listening back to special studio conversations with guests from around the world. The mailbag today features your thoughts and stories about dealing with confidence, self-doubt, and imposter syndrome. And before we start to chat, a hearty thank you to those who believe in the cast enough that you're Patreon members or extra milers, as I know you by. And also to mpb.com, who sponsor this show. If you've been hearing their name on this show and haven't tried them yet, then today has to be that day. Let me tell you more. A service I use for buying, selling and trading used camera gear is MPB. As a website platform, mpb.com is the place where I can safely buy, sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online. And online guarantees make this a place I feel safe to buy from, unlike some other marketplaces. Here's how it works. You go online to mpb.com and search for gear that you'd like to add to your kit bag. Or if you're selling gear you no longer need, click the button at the top of the website that says Start Selling and Trading and just follow the very easy instructions. From there, you print off a packing label, stick it on the box with all your gear in it. It's collected by a courier free of charge from your front door. And the best bit, MPB pays you for your camera gear within days. And a news flash for November, if you're upgrading your gear this Black Friday, shop used, save year round. So join me and the hundreds of thousands of photographers every year in the US, Europe and the UK who know that MPB is the place to buy, sell, trade and create. And I have some MPB 5% off offers that I shall tell you about as I walk in a while. Right, lots to talk about today. Your letters in between my chats with Sean to help the conversation along. How you've been dealing with confidence and self-doubt and so on. Plus, the assignment as we're into the last 2 weeks of that. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, definitely check. Walking boots, check. SD cards or a spare roll of film, check. And a fly swat to just knock off that thing that sits on your shoulder that says, "You're not good enough, you're not. Who are you kidding? Your work." Oh, check. Well, let's walk. Before hearing from Sean, I spied this picture with some thoughts in the Facebook community we have. So I'm going to start with, picture a scene with me. It's a photograph of a solitary man in a coffee shop in Glasgow. And the photograph was taken by Scott Glasgow. Scott Glasgow in Glasgow. Anyway, it's a chap looking deep into his cell phone, wearing this cool hat, actually, sat next to a first-floor window. And I know it's a first-floor window. I worked out the height by the fact that through the window I can see the top deck of a double-decker bus, the people sitting in it, which is just passing by in the street below. We're going to talk a bit about isolation later on and the isolated creative. So these words seem, I think, very pertinent. I'll pop the picture on the show page today, but Scott writes, here's just a simple picture of a pleasing subject made out of interest due to the hat in the nice location. It all looks idyllic, says Scott, but on closer inspection, I feel a tinge of sadness. This person looks to be, like many of us, having a coffee and communicating via a mobile phone rather than sharing the space and experiencing the physical presence of another human being. It was taken in a lovely, wee Italian-inspired coffee shop in the centre of Glasgow called Smile. We, me being the other listener, talk about connection a lot. Now, I'm very happy in my own company, says Scott, and I'm not suggesting it's a bad thing, but the sadness in this image, for me that is, comes from the fact that this picture is self-reflective due to, me craving more interaction that's not virtual or aided by technology. But life is busy for us all, and sometimes it feels that remote communication is the only way to maintain connection. As I say, Scott, we'll deal with isolation as a sub-theme of our conversation today, but also one here from Kim Cofield before we start, whose name you heard at the head of today's show. Feeling like an imposter, says Kim, is one of those thoughts that I think artists commonly experience. After all, who are we to call ourselves a photographer or an artist? Or a sculptor, or insert your particular practice here. After all, anybody can call themselves an artist, can't they? I think the most damaging thoughts we can have are those of comparison. Comparing ourselves to our peers is often fraught with danger. I know this all too well. This way, pups. Come on, this way. I know this all too well, as I'm currently in the midst of actively trying to stop doing just that. I've been comparing myself to my fellow dog photographers and feeling very much that I'm just not good enough, which has caused me to actually stop taking photos. What I'm trying to remember, and I'd like to suggest your other listener tries this, is that I am good enough right now. I'll continue to improve, and I'm better than I was this time last year. Accepting good enough is sometimes hard, but definitely worth it. It frees up the mind to focus on what needs doing right now. Thanks for everything you do, from Kim. Well, thank you, Kim. I think you're... come on, pups, this way. Come on. Kim, you'd appreciate this moment. He's had his groom this morning, and guess what the first thing he did was... I can hear you, even though you're all the way in Australia land and I'm walking along a path at the moment in Berkshire, in England land. You guessed it, rolled in mud. But Kim, yes, your words, your thoughts are perfect to open the curtain, I suppose, on our chat, and their thoughts echoed through my conversation with Sean today, which I'd like to start. Now, how I'm going to present this is to play sections that cover undervaluing your accomplishments, fear of failure, comparison anxiety, inadequacy, perfectionism, and confidence. And we'll start with self-doubt and/or imposter syndrome. Here's my guest on the topic of that for this special, Sean Tucker, the philosophical YouTuber, somebody who mentors and talks about these feelings and subjects much on his thought-provoking YouTube channel and within his book, The Meaning in the Making. Sean Tucker.
Sean, we start with imposter syndrome, but actually I'm now having self-doubt because there's irony, because self-doubt and imposter syndrome are sort of the same as I've been researching. But But I'm going to start with a letter. I'll read just a bit of the letter out, if you don't mind. It's reasonably long, but I think it sets the scene for the rest of today's show, which is about imposter syndrome, but it's about a lot more. So this is from Eric Joseph. I don't talk about my background too much, but I wanted to preface my thoughts with noting my background in clinical psychology. I'm a former licensed clinical psychologist that used to practice in the veterans healthcare system here in the States. I did more of what I call coaching versus traditional psychotherapy, and also a lot of neuropsychological assessment. I no longer practice. I now teach undergraduate psychology courses full-time at a university. But I think that probably sets up what he's just about to say. So some thoughts for you and Sean. And he asks if I'd like to start a new trend. You'll understand as we go along. I think Sean would agree that our language is very important. The words we use frame our reality. I have a visceral reaction to the term imposter syndrome, given the last 20 years of working with chronic medical and psychological illnesses. A syndrome is a disease process. By framing natural insecurities as a disease, we further suggest to ourselves that there's something wrong with us. While I'm not the biggest fan of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and no one is, imposter syndrome doesn't seem to be in there. I've looked in the International Classification of Diseases, and I'm pretty sure it's not in there. So how about starting a trend of no longer calling it imposter syndrome and maybe refer to what it actually is? Self-doubt. And it did get me thinking. You've made this film about imposter syndrome. I've called the show Imposter Syndrome, and immediately I'm wondering and doubting myself whether I should call it imposter syndrome. Self-doubt for me, though, almost seems a more flippant name to what can be degrees of something that can be mentally really quite challenging. You know, that kind of, I'm not sure about this. I've got a little bit of self-doubt here, as opposed to another person not even being able to launch themselves into something that they can quite honestly do and do well, but they're being held back in life because they have this high level internally of feeling like they're not worthy, they're not good enough. Ergo, they are some kind of imposter. They feel or fear that they're going to be found out. And I think the two are entirely different.
I couldn't agree with that email more, though. I think we tend to, therapize, medicalize very normal human emotions nowadays. And I think he's absolutely right that when you call something that is basically, insecurity, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, we make ourselves sound like we have mental illness for something that's a very, very common state of emotions that all of us face at some point. So I really agree with that. I'd like a rebranding too. I mean, we just use the term because colloquially everyone understands what that means and what we're referring to. But yeah, I think that goes across the board. There's a real danger today. I mean, it's like, this might not be a popular point of view, but it's like, everybody claims now that they have an anxiety disorder, right? Yeah. But maybe you just have some anxiety about things that you should feel anxious about because that's normal and human and it's a normal emotion. So yeah, I think starting by normalizing what is a very common human experience is a really good place to start, and leave things like mental illness and syndromes or whatever to people who actually have that because they've been diagnosed and they're getting the help they need for that. And I think then maybe it turns the temperature down on something that makes you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm broken for not having bulletproof self-confidence. That's probably, adding more self-doubt and guilt about ourselves on top of something that we're just struggling with in a very kind of normal human emotion range. I think that makes sense. Yeah, I agree with that email a lot.
My wife, Sam, works in a department at school where labelling has become an important part of whether they get certain amounts of funding, parents and the school. And we are living with more and more labels, aren't we?
Yeah, and the email you read out, this is somebody who obviously is in that psychology world. And, I did a psychology degree years ago. That was my university degree. And I share that hatred for the DSM, what are we on, 5 now, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, because the propensity is to put everyone who has any kind of negative experience, find the right box to put them in and stick the right label on them. And then we can either chuck medication at them or a course of counseling at them so that we can just sort of move them off and let them sort of start to cope with things. But actually, so much of, I think we've forgotten how much life is supposed to be up and down. That's normal. It's right that Some days we have good days and we're happy or euphoric or hopeful. And then other days we're depressed or doubting ourselves or anxious. That's every human being throughout human history. So it's absolutely fine that we go through that. Some people genuinely deal with mental health issues you need to put a label on, but that's usually because of something's very uncalibrated, or they're not able to cope with their own decision making, or be held accountable for their choices, or there's some chemical imbalance that needs to be medicated. That's worthy of putting syndrome on or disorder on. I think everything else we have to normalize, and then we can start by going, okay, let me begin by going, this self-doubt I have or this lack of confidence is normal. Everyone experiences it. Now, how can I cope with it?
Eric, I'm going to ask you to bear with us, really, as I use that for the title and refer to it in the next few minutes, because at least it's something that I think the audience are expecting in respect of what this week's show is all about. But he does make a good point, and perhaps, yes, I might start to reframe it after this episode as self-doubt. Can I ask you a question, actually, a bit of a personal question?
Sure.
Is there a moment where, I'll call it imposter syndrome for the moment, where it's impacted your work as a photographer?
Yeah, I think, often. Yeah, I mean, I think things that jump to mind straight away are, I know when I started out my first full-time job when I came back to the UK as the in-house product photographer for a company in London, I felt like an imposter. You know, I had only really been a professional photographer who was actually making money off my photography for about 18 months, 2 years maximum back in South Africa when I came over here. And I basically did what everyone does in interviews, right? I went in and they said, well, do you know how to shoot products? And I had done product photography in my previous job, but I'd never shot anything as large as they were asking. It was like big, you know, dining sets and sofas in big warehouses. Like, you know how to do that, right? I'm like, yeah, of course I know how to do that. My friend Doug used to say to me, like, if you go into an interview, tell them you can do absolutely anything, and then make sure that on day one you do know how to do that, or you'll lose all your credibility and you'll hurt your reputation. So I kind of took that as a challenge, and I'd already started doing some searching online, and I thought, yeah, I can do this. But on day one, walking into that room, I knew the theory of it, and I'd done a tiny bit of practice, but I definitely felt like maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I've bitten off more than I can chew. Maybe I'm running ahead of myself here. And it took a little while. I would say it took about 3 months of doing lots of those shoots and starting to feel more confident. And it wasn't proving to my bosses that I was confident. It was proving to myself I was confident, because they didn't know anything about photography anyway. So anything I did was amazing in their eyes. It was like, oh my gosh, you look at how the background's so white. You know what I mean? This blew their minds that was possible in camera. And I mean, that was a fairly easy trick for me to do, but I could see all the things I needed to fix to get to my standard in my head, not my bosses who knew nothing about photography. But doing those shoots and taking care of those things and getting the photographs to a point where I was comfortable with the quality and that I could replicate the results every time I picked the camera up. It didn't just happen on a good day by accident. Then my confidence started to catch up. But those first 3 months, definitely a lot of like, I'm running before I can walk here and I'm a fake.
Do you think it's age related? Because I remember certainly when I became a broadcaster, and I probably am a photographer, but certainly in my broadcasting years where I was late teens, early 20s, it was, I could take the world on here. And I remember meeting one of the most famous broadcasters in the UK anyway, in the lift on day one. And I didn't feel, I think now I would, am I in the same lift as this person? I think then there was a degree of confidence, almost arrogance. I wouldn't like to think I was an arrogant person, but I think I needed a level of that. And I think as we grow older, maybe we learn imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, you're lucky. I don't think I ever had that stage of bulletproof adolescent confidence. I know I skipped that phase somewhere.
I soon had it beaten out of me. Don't worry.
Yeah, well,
by various producers who brought me down to planet Earth. And
take two, Neil.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I don't think I had that really. I think I was always a bit insecure and feeling like I had to prove myself. And I was always, and I suppose this is just different personalities, isn't it? And I would always be the last person to say that I was doing a good job. Everyone else would say it, and I was the last person to catch up and go, yeah, okay, that was pretty good. So Maybe something changes with age where, well, and one thing is you care a little less, I think. I think you care about the feedback a little less because you learn to put it into context. So that's been on the helpful side, that's been helpful. But I think the more you take in, the more you know about what other people are doing, the more your horizons expand about, say, photography, right? The more, when you're starting out, you don't know any great photographers. You don't really know, you haven't picked up great photography books. And even if you did, you wouldn't know how to look at them yet and know why it's good, right? But the more you learn about whatever you're involved in and how great it can get, I think that the more mountainous that target seems. And I think that can lead to some insecurity and some like, I'm never going to be Steve McCurry or Joel Meyerowitz. It's not going to happen. I'm okay with that. But now I know how great photography can get. I'm like, my ambitions have had to get squashed a little, and I've had to adjust my target at the end of the road and go, I'm happy to make good work through my life, and I don't have to shoot for the top of the pyramid anymore. Maybe that confidence in my 20s were like, if I'm going to engage with something, I have to be the best or I've failed. That's kind of changed. That's mellowed over time. Maybe it also turns the temperature down on how much pressure I put on myself to have to be the best at something.
The longer you're in something, the more you start to learn the lingo about that something as well. I remember becoming a photographer, and I didn't really know about the word imposter syndrome. I'd not heard. It wasn't a term that was bandied around. And I called myself a visitor to start with, which seems to perhaps to be a kinder phrase, perhaps even, well, kinder than self-doubt as well. That I felt I was a visitor, and I'd just come along. I was learning this thing, but I was a visitor, so I'd allow myself some mistakes. But that helped me. Perhaps that was a term that protected me. Maybe that would be quite a good term to use when you start something new. You're a visitor when you start.
Yeah, but even as you go along, I think one of the best antidotes to imposter syndrome, or whatever we want to call it now, is having a sober view of where you're at in that journey. You know, one of the big problems with imposter syndrome is I think we're comparing ourselves to the wrong thing. We're trying to compare ourselves to people who are much better than us and who've been doing it a lot longer. And because we're not as good as them already, we're somehow a fake, right? So, and it's weird, the response you get. Like, I did some talks around the States a couple of months ago. And as one of the parts of this talk, I say, I know where I sit in terms, I'm using it to talk about social media and not taking that stuff too seriously, and saying that, you know, I have a bigger account online than photographers who are much better than me. And as a response to that, I say that's ridiculous, because I consider myself to be a middling photographer. Like I have a varied skill set. I can move between a lot of different genres. I have some technical knowledge. I have some skill. But I'm still just a middling photographer, and I'm trying to grow, but that's where I am now. And it was really interesting that in America particularly, they don't like you saying that. They really don't. It's beyond self-deprecation for them. That is now, you shouldn't put yourself down like that. Because I think there's, especially in America, there is this culture of like hyper ambition and be the best, and maybe just our kind of dour British sensibilities, which is like nice. It's fine. I'm okay to admit where I'm at, and because I can admit that, because I can say I'm not the best at any genre of photography. I don't deserve to be, you know, in galleries around the world for anything yet, and that's okay. Then I don't have to feel like a fake, because I'm not pretending I'm something I'm not. I'm admitting where I actually am. So I think using language that's accurate about where we are, and calling ourselves on when we're being too self-deprecating or bigging ourselves up too much, calling ourselves on both ends of that, but trying to be really sober about where do I actually fit in this whole thing. It takes all the kind of pretending off the table.
Well, since you mentioned the word fake, do you think there's philosophies or strategies that we can use to address this feeling that we're somehow faking it? Perhaps my visitor thing might fit into that category. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the most helpful philosophers for me on this, and literally philosophers, were the Stoics. Like reading the Stoic stuff is you know, philosophers like Epictetus and Seneca and Marcus Aurelius who made a big deal about talking about discerning what you can control and what you can't, and having that sober view of your life and what you can actually do and what you should be doing. Like, I feel like there's a lot of peace and personal security that comes with just admitting who and where you're at in life, and not trying to pretend that you have more in control than you actually do. So saying to myself that today, if I'm posting street photography, for example, and some people get on and go, well, I don't think this is very good, or anything else, I can take that very personally and start to internalize it and feel like a fake, because I should be as good as Ray Metzger or whoever, like that's where I feel like that's where I should be at, and because I'm not, and this person's left a mean comment on something, I now want to quit. Right? That's too uncalibrated. Instead of going, all I can actually control is going out and making the images I really believe in and I like the look of and I stand by. I can admit that they're not the best in the world, because I'm not the best photographer in the world, but I'm trying and I'm developing every day. And for me, the journey is the long one. And then let everything else go. I don't have to prove anything. I can find a security in that. So I've found that reading the Stoics has been pretty helpful on that.
I know that imposter syndrome is not unique to creatives, but we do seem to have owned this category, if we're going to call it that. It does seem to manifest more in terms of my conversations with creatives than it does with my other friends who are nothing to do with the creative world. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I was mentioning I was going to be having this conversation with you, and he said, he looked at me in this kind of, oh, is that really a thing? And it struck me that in his world, it isn't. And he works at a massive corporation.
Yeah, I think creatives do struggle with it because we're isolated. We're often alone, especially photographers, right? It's a very solo pursuit.
Yeah.
I always wish I was a filmmaker, because when you fail in the film,
hang on, you are.
Well, but like a filmmaker, because I feel like someone who makes feature films.
Oh, hang on, your filmmaking's not good enough then.
No, see, I'm a fake. I feel like when you fail in that world, you fail as a team. There's a bunch of you working on something together.
Yeah.
But when you fail as a photographer, it's just on you. And I think that pressure of being a solo artist of any sort, where you are really sitting in a room alone, looking at the work you've made, wondering if it's good enough, you can really get in your head so fast. But when you're working on things together, or working as part of a team in a company or anything else, you're talking to other people, you're in it together, which means the load or the weight of that expectation to succeed is spread amongst all the people who are involved. Whereas, I think artists, and especially solo artists, we have a unique, well, not unique, but we have a very particular solo battle to fight in our own heads, where we have to really back ourselves. And that's a tough thing to do. You have to get yourself into a mental state to believe that what you made is good enough to share with the world and weather the backlash. And that's tough for anybody, right?
I was nodding with much approval during your film when you mentioned isolation, because I think that is a major part of my life. When there are moments where I'm doubting my ability, it'll be like now. There's me, there's Barney at the back, and he's great, but he's not fantastic.
He's very supportive.
He's supportive, as long as there's a dog chew at the end of it.
Yeah.
But in terms of conversation, I can't say the boardroom of me and he is very electric with ideas, and that isolation's the toughest bit for me. It always has been. Actually, even in my radio days, because you'd essentially be in a studio on your own with a red light. It's you and you. I wonder sometimes as well, I mean, I'm thinking about your friend now, Simon Baxter. His beautiful work that he does in Woodland, and Mally Davis and friends of mine. But that's a very lonely occupation again, isn't it?
But that's where I think like those creative friendships really come in handy, is pairing up with people. I mean, Simon and I go for, when we're both around, we'll go for coffee once a week up on the moors and chat. And a lot of that chat is sharing the projects we're working on with each other and getting that feedback. So you're not just sitting in a room with your ideas bouncing back at you, or running around the woodlands, on your own going, is this any good? Does anyone care? I think imposter syndrome, for lack of a better term, I think it only really works in isolation, because the minute you share what you're working on, or your fears or doubts about it, with somebody who cares about you and your journey, and who knows they know what they're talking about, they're going to give you a good mirror back about where you're at, if they're a good friend. And that's for positive and negative. They'll tell you when you're off track, so you can trust it when the positive comes. And having that honest mirror in those friends, so you don't isolate yourself. You're going out, you're sharing, you're talking. It's very hard to hold on to that, lack of self-confidence in the same way because you literally have to discount everything this person you trust is saying to be able to do that, which feels like a betrayal of their friendship to me, right? Why talk to you if I'm not going to listen to what you're saying and believe it? The reason we're friends is because I trust you. So when Simon says to me, Simon says, I've just realized. So when Simon says to me, that thing you're doing, I think it's really good. And I've been sitting in a room going, oh, is this any good? Is this rubbish? Should I just can it? When he says that, I trust him. So it gives me this little bolster going, maybe I'm too close to it. Maybe I'm overthinking this thing again. I'm going to trust my friend rather than trust my inner voice, which is sometimes a bit mean to me. And I'm going to keep going. And it gives me a bit more belief in actually the direction I'm going.
I'm going to ask one more question about imposter syndrome before we move on to confidence. Do you think imposter syndrome can it ever be constructive? Or is it purely a barrier to creative growth?
I think it's mostly a barrier. I think it's because it stops you making, right? If it wins out, it stops you making. But I think when imposter syndrome first comes around in your journey, because it's not there the whole time. When you're a beginner, it's just fun. It's when you start to get a little bit of traction with your work, then imposter syndrome at that sort of stage 2 of your journey, that's when it kicks in hardest, I reckon. And I think that's a good sign that it's there because you suddenly care about your work in a new way. You really want it to go the distance. And now you have to fight that good fight in your head and deal with this lack of self-confidence you have. And I think if you can push through it, if you can learn how to deal with it well, it means you're a more robust artist for the long run. So I think the fact that it arrives is not a bad thing. But what it is itself, if you let it win, will kill your creativity completely. So it's a fight we all have to fight. And when you fight it well, it's gonna make you a far better photographer or painter or writer or whatever you happen to be.
I cannot believe you. Yes, I know, you've covered yourself in mud. Look at you. Hey? I'm not sure why I'm giving you one of these treats, because quite honestly, Sabarkalot, and don't you dare walk all over those letters and my notes. Don't. Quite honestly, you've let yourself down. Look at you. You were beautifully pristine but an hour ago. Go on, enjoy it. What have you got in your... Come here. What have you got in your fur there? Look at you. Honestly. Really. Hey? Oh. Come on. Right. Sean Tucker returns for part 2 of our conversation very shortly. I mentioned at the start of the show that MPB, for a limited time this is, have a 5% discount for new customers in the UK, the US and Ireland. So if you've not used MPB before, it's a service I use. We talk about it. No, come on. No more now. Really, I'm trying to do my MPB thing. Come on. If you've not used MPB before and would like to try buying, selling or trading through the most fantastic online service for just that, go to the show page today. You'll find the links for a discount on the show page itself. Some super thoughts on the subjects we're talking about today. Some letters that have been received. If yours isn't read out yet, notice I use the word yet, it'll no doubt feature as feedback to the topics in the weeks to come. Look at this, pups. This is beautiful. I'm going to make another photograph through the trees, I think. Oh, late, well, it's not yet winter. Late autumn, nearly winter, sun. The warmth, absolutely wonderful. Another sunburst picture, so f8, 160 ISO. Look at the colours of these leaves. Fabulous. Another sketchbook photograph from today's walk. I've come to the end of the year, and this is not imposter syndrome or confidence or self-doubt, by the way. This is, I feel a sense of reality. I don't think I've made as many super shots as I did last year on my walks. I've concentrated my walks in fairly similar paths that I've trod. And I've tried to see if I can make pictures in the same place. It's a difficult thing. I think it's worth practicing, making photographs in the same places. and trying to return something that's truly a bit unique each time. Right, come on, another couple of these pups. There we go. Right. And before you say Neil, treats. He'll put weight on. This is kibble that he has for treats. Come on, this way. So it's like he's like lunch today, isn't it, pups? Like lunch. So yeah, some super thoughts to come on the subjects that we have today. It's confidence next. Although first a letter from Alan Sorensen on the lead subject, really, imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, says Alan, is rooted in fear of failure. And fears ultimately lead or are tied to our self-worth. As we know, we're often our own worst critics. And while empty praise is never the answer, sometimes we need to remember that others might view us as the success they wish to model. And oh, how true that is. It really is. As an artist, says Alan, I've learned that my greatest and most meaningful experiences have occurred when I push through fear and take risks, even when I don't think I'm ready. This has been most apparent in my career as an educator and musician. Taking the risk to audition for peer-reviewed performances or embracing the many challenges of taking students on extended study abroad experiences, it's enriched my life in ways I'd never have imagined. Not all my auditions were successful. In fact, some were downright painful. But the ones that succeeded more than made up for it. As Mark Twain said, courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. As I work every day to combat my imposter syndrome, I try to practice self-compassion, to stop comparing myself to others, and to avoid trying to constantly prove my self-worth. I remember that my many accomplishments, no matter how small, create a pattern I can use to remind myself that I and my art have value. In the end, says Alan, we're all doing the very best we can, and we should work to embrace and celebrate our differences. Such a great and timely topic. I'm looking forward to this episode very much. Well, thank you, Alan, for your thoughts, your words. I might do, actually, is collect these words together, these thoughts, and pop them on, because we haven't popped anything up recently, I think, on the photo essays tab. And I know this isn't, in essence, a photo essay, but I think it could be. I think this topic really could be a great photo essay. Certainly a reference point all of its own. So I might actually pop these there. When I do that, I'll let you know. Anyway, let's return to Sean, shall we? Let's.
Right, confidence. I know that imposter syndrome, confidence, inadequacy, self-doubt, I mean, actually, they're all quite close in some respects to each other when we discuss them as an overall topic. But I think there are nuances. There are slight differences. From your film, which was about imposter syndrome, there was a quote right at the start that I scribbled furiously down. Robert Hughes, the greater the artist, said Robert, the greater the doubt. Perfect confidence is granted to the less talented as a consolation prize. I chuckled at that, which made me feel far more comfortable, actually, Sean, about the times my confidence takes a knock. And that seems to be in plentiful supply since COVID. Confidence and COVID, they start with the same letter. There's and I've felt that certainly over this period. Where do you feel the line is between confidence then and imposter syndrome? Where's the nuance here that I'm establishing or trying to establish?
I think the mistake you can make is to think that confidence is the antidote to imposter syndrome, and I'm not sure it is. I think maybe it's a comfort with a lack of confidence is probably the antidote. Because I think the problem we've got today is that we have too many confident people who don't really know what they're talking about. And we can drum up fake confidence about anything. It's why, our politics is so polarized in our world, is because everybody stands on the opposite side of a chasm yelling really confident things at each other. And the truth is often somewhere in that messy middle, at the risk of sounding like a centrist dad. But I mean, it is. I really believe that, and I think it's a big problem we've got. And I don't trust people who are too confident anymore, because I feel like it's a front for your lack of confidence or the things that you don't actually have answers to. And I'd rather have an honest conversation with somebody who's open and says, I know this much, but I know nothing about everything else. And I've got lots of questions. And who wants to talk about the questions in an open and honest way? Those are far more interesting conversations to me. So I reckon there's a creativity version of that is the antidote to imposter syndrome. And it's saying, well, it's being honest about what I'm good at, honest about what I know and what I can be confident in. But that might be quite a short list. It is a short list for me, right? And the list of things I don't know is far longer and bigger than the list of things I know. The list of things I'm not good at is much longer than the list of things I'm really good at. Right. But because I'm honest about all that, and I can say my lack of confidence is only about the things that I don't know about, and that's okay, because how could it be any other way? I've still got things to learn, and that's a good thing. When I'm sober about where this all shakes out, I think that's when I can start to put this uncalibrated anxiety around imposter syndrome to bed a little bit and move on and make the work. So I would say don't think that you have to be a super confident individual who needs to pretend you know everything to cover for imposter syndrome. The people you really respect are humble. They're not trying to pretend they know everything. They're open about the things they don't know, and they're willing to learn all the time. Rather aim for that. I think that's a better antidote.
Yeah. My dad used to talk about humility as being a superpower. Well, not quite sure he called it a superpower, but I know he used the words humble and humility.
Humble man, yeah.
Humble man. But where does confidence then become arrogance? Because they're close bed partners, aren't they? Is arrogance the politician shouting across the chasm?
I think it's that. I mean, I wrote a little bit about this in The Meaning in the Making, the kind of why you need your ego, why it's really important in the work that you make, but it's a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, we know that sometimes we can get ahead of ourselves and think we're really good at something, which means we start to shut off. And no one can tell us anything anymore. No one can give us criticism. We know everything about everything. And we basically stop growing at that point. We stagnate because we sort of build this wall around us that lets people think we've got it all together and we don't need any more help or growth anywhere. That's bad. We know that's bad. We know that's an uncalibrated ego. But on the flip side of it, you have to have that ego because you need to be able to back yourself in the things that you make. So it's this fine line you've got to ride where you make things and then you believe in what you've made enough that you find the courage to give that to the world, right? Because that does take a certain amount of courage to share your work with the world. But then when you give it away, to let go of the results and trust that actually some people will love it, some people will hate it, that's fine. And that I don't need to control the results after that, right? So I don't need to be arrogant after that and go, well, if you don't think what I made is brilliant, you're wrong and you don't know anything. Like that's an uncalibrated ego. That's ugly. That's just because I don't like the fact that someone didn't like something and I need to throw my toys and try to bully them. Like that's not helpful either. So I think there's that really fine line to ride with ego. Like on the one hand, avoid the arrogance. We know what that flavor is. We know what that tastes like. And on the other hand, find enough ego, enough sense of self that you can put yourself into your work and choose to give it away, even though that's scary.
Confidence and self-belief are probably a bed partner here as well, aren't they? In my shed, I'm pointing that way like you'd know where it was, Sean. but in my shed, which is that way, by the way, there is the Book of No. I call it the Book of No. And it's a file of all the times I've been told no in my life. I kept all the letters from my radio days. There's at least 200 in there. And I'm quite proud of the Book of No because it was something that gave me, I think it might have been my dad that said, keep the letters, son. One day you might refer back to them and it'll help you with, understanding that you were good enough. And I look at Walt Disney, what was he told? He wasn't creative enough. That was it. He lost his job. Didn't he lose his job in television or something? And he was told, Walt, you're just not creative enough. Yeah. Having that confidence to come back to something is really important. Have you been through similar things in your life?
Yeah, many times. I mean, on that, Stephen King was the same, wasn't he? He put a nail in the wall that he pushed every rejection letter for publishing into, and he had hundreds of letters before he published his first book. I
didn't know that one.
It's a story as old as time, and I think we've all been through. I've been through it in lots of different ways. Like when I first started out with the church, nothing to do with photography, but one of the things I needed to learn how to do was to speak in public, to be able to do the job well. Right, my job was to work with 35-year-olds and under. I needed to know how to communicate with them from a stage. I was terrified of speaking in public. And the first few preaching classes we had at seminary, preaching class was stand up for 45 minutes and give your talk, go for a 5-minute break, come back. And then for the second 45 minutes, the class gets to sit and talk about what you just did, and you're not allowed to. You can only listen to what they're saying. And it was just shredding you to pieces.
Goodness.
You hold your hands weird, you tell weird story, that didn't make sense, you make weird faces, like everything you could think of. I wanted to run for the hills because I was not good. I really was not a good communicator. And the temptation to give up was strong. Like I really wanted to run away, but I decided that potentially I could do more good. And maybe if I could learn how to do this, and me trying to run away because it was an uncomfortable situation was the coward's way out. So I thought, I need to stick this out and see how far I can go. And I got better, and I got better fast. I mean, the YouTube videos I make today are because I learned how to communicate there. I wouldn't be able to do them they wouldn't have the flavor they do now if I didn't learn those lessons then. And I got ripped to shreds, believe me, and for a while, right? So I think there's something to be said for really sticking it out. Like, let those rejections come. If you believe that you have something to offer in a space, no one's going to see it for a while. That's normal. But you're going to have to believe in yourself for a bit and just keep pushing through. But keep making, keep learning, keep changing, keep iterating, keep releasing that work into the world and see what happens. And you know what? If the worst that happens is that you spend your life making work you really believe in, and some people like it and some people don't, if that's the worst that happens, that doesn't sound too terrible to me. But maybe it really does start to connect with people and take off, and that would be brilliant. You just have to be able to weather the negative stuff when it comes in and believe that you've got something to offer.
And Sean is back soon for his thoughts on perfectionism, which is accompanied actually by this letter from Charlie Hastings. Thank you, Charlie. Well, this show is certainly timely, he says, because this has been on my mind a lot lately, perfectionism. It's always been a double-edged sword for me in my photography. On the one hand, it pushes me to improve, to notice detail, to keep learning. But the downside is that it often stops me from actually enjoying the process, or even worse, it stops me from pressing the shutter in the first place. Pups, bear with me, I'm reading Charlie's letter. For a long time, I found myself obsessing over tiny details, convinced that if I just adjusted one more thing, it's a Columbo moment this, isn't it? Just one more thing, the photo would be right, in inverted commas. But in the process, I started to realize that I was losing the joy of simply taking my camera out and photographing. Perfectionism, he says, can be a motivator though. It does push us to improve, to notice those details, to pay attention. But there's a fine line between aiming to grow and letting that drive for perfect actually hold us back. Sometimes the most powerful images are the ones with imperfections, the ones that capture a fleeting, very honest moment, rather than a polished one. Your conversation with the American wedding photographer John Dolan comes to mind, where he positively embraces and highlights the imperfections in his photographs. After all, he's written a book about it. I'm learning to treat perfectionism as a tool, not a rule. It's there to help me grow, but it doesn't have to dictate every click of the shutter. Letting go of the need for everything to be just right has freed me to take more risks. With a small R, as you say, enjoy the process and focus, full pun intended, on what photography is really all about. Capturing a feeling, not a flawless frame. All the best from Charlie. Charlie, fantastic thoughts there. Really, thank you for those. Which is a perfect way, can you see what I did there? To bring Sean back in to talk about perfectionism and comparison anxiety.
Perfectionism. Well, where do we start to unpick this? You did say something within your film about, done is better. What's the phrase you used? Done is...
Oh, it's Sheryl Sandberg. Yeah, Sheryl Sandberg says done is better than perfect.
That's it, yeah. Which I agree with. How does perfectionism show up for you in your own creative process when you're making your films?
Oh, every time. I mean, you might be surprised to hear this. I have to talk myself into posting it live every time still.
Do you?
Years later.
Right.
Every time I've just finished cutting one today that's been preloaded to go out next Sunday, this Sunday. And, I'm looking at it going, it's not good. I can see all the mistakes. It has to be good enough for now. It has to be done. I really need to bully myself a little bit, to be honest, and say, if I let my perfectionism win here, I won't post videos. I won't post this one. But I know it's done and I'll make the next one better. And that's what I've done for years now. I can't make the one I'm working on perfect. I can do the best I can with the time that I have and the skills that I have now. hit it live and move on to the next one and make that a tiny bit better. Then it's in the iterations every time that it gets slightly better, and then the work gets much better over time. And a weird thing happens, because when I look back over videos I made 5 years ago that I hated when I made them, and I didn't want to give them to the world, I wanted to keep them because I thought they weren't good enough. They're not bad, you know? I'm actually like, oh, I'm kind of proud of that one for that point. I kind of like it now. There's something about perfectionism and it makes me realize how much it lies in the moment, how hard I am on myself, and how negative I am about the work that I make in the moment because I'm scared of what people's response is going to be to it, and how kind I am to myself when I look back at that work in the future and the pressure's off. Then I can see it for what it really is. And I realize, yeah, that was fine to release that. It's actually good. And you should remember that the next time you feel pressure about the new thing you're doing and being too scared to give it away.
Well, is there, I mean, I know it's a digital thing, but is there then, I'm trying to imagine this box of lost Sean Tucker tapes that were never put out. Are there films you haven't put out?
There's one that I didn't release, right. Just one.
And why was that?
I can't even remember. I just remember there is one. It was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. It was early on when I was trying to do more than one a month for a while. And I just remember making it and looking back going, I lost the battle with that one. I lost the perfectionist battle. And maybe if I watch it back now, I would go, yeah, you were being way too hard on yourself. It's fine. Yeah. Because the thing is, like, why am I giving those videos away? Like, am I giving them away because I want to be popular and I want people to like me? Or am I giving them away because I genuinely think that video is going to help? Because if someone criticizes me for the fact that the lighting in that shot isn't very good, or the color grade's a bit weird, or the timing's off, or you waffle a bit, does that matter as much as the people who watch that video and go, oh, that was really helpful what you did, that really made a difference?
Yeah. What advice would you give to photographers then who feel, I'm going to use the word paralyzed by the pursuit of this perfect shot, this perfect picture to put on their perfect Instagram grid?
Yeah. Oh, you can't. You got to let it go. You can't, because if you try and do that, you're going to make much less work, which means you're going to grow less, right? Because I'm a firm believer that you only grow every time you click the shutter.
Yeah.
Right. You don't grow by sitting on the sofa thinking about perfect shots. You grow by going out and taking a lot of shots and making a lot of mistakes. So if you get paralyzed by this, I'm not going to take shots until they're perfect or unless they're really good. And I'm definitely not going to share them with the world and get any response to them unless they're perfect or good. You are slowing your growth down tenfold. Instead of having the courage to go out and make a lot of work and share a lot of work and get a lot of feedback and make a lot of mistakes, that leads to faster growth. And for me personally, I want to be a better photographer more than I want you to be impressed with my work. And so, I mean, my Instagram has got, 3,000 something images on it, and they're all there right from the beginning.
You've never taken one off?
I've probably taken a few off here and there, but I mean, most of it's still there from the beginning. You can go right back to the start and see the first photograph I posted on Instagram where I was photographing on a phone and over editing everything. It's all there. The whole journey is there right from the start. And that's important to me because I'm not trying to hide the fact that I'm getting better all the time and I'm growing. And if you don't like the image I posted today, I'm fine with that, because to me, it's about growth in the long term and being a better photographer in the long term. And I think I'll get much better than somebody who's sitting on the sofa too scared to shoot or post because they're worried it won't be good enough. That's my goal.
Well, I'm going to join perfectionism together here with comparison anxiety.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to push on with social media a bit here as well. Because with social media showcasing everybody's highlight reel, the best of the best of the best, how do you keep yourself from falling into the trap of comparison? I speak to so many photographers who have started to, they're mooting that they can no longer look at social media because it becomes an anxiety-inducing thing, which is a shame because this whole platform was invented for us to enjoy each other's work and be a part of other people's work and push them on and sort of help them along. But it's now become something that's anxiety-inducing for many.
This is going to sound like a strong thing to say, but I do believe it. I think if you're at the stage where you have to get off social media because it's causing you anxiety in the comparison, it's time to talk to somebody about it, because there's something else going on there. Because it's not social media's fault. Social media are just companies that make money off selling advertising by sticking it on the stuff we post, right? They don't have an agenda other than their shareholders, so they don't care. The other people peers, our contemporaries who are posting work like other street photographers, and I'm a street photographer, other portrait photographers or landscape photographers, and I'm a landscape photographer, whatever your genre is, they're not thinking about you. Probably they're just posting work because they like the look of it, right? So they're running their own race and doing their own thing. If you're feeling anxiety about that, it's time to face something, because there's something you are holding on to, or there's a jealousy or there's an envy there that's starting to take root that is going to take you off track. And like you, I know lots of people who've given up entirely because social media didn't give them what they wanted, or they got angry with another photographer they've never even met for posting stuff that they're not even aware of. You know, that person's not even aware of you, but it's really upsetting you. I think there's really something to sort out there. I mean, there was a quote, I can't remember who it's by, but the quote was something like, you know, jealousy of that sort is basically like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You know, it hurts you, right? Like you're sitting there twisting with a knot in your gut because you're a landscape photographer and Thomas Heaton's posting these photographs and I want to give up because I'm so angry about it. That's in you. That's not in him. He's probably sleeping fine at night, right? Because he doesn't know about the comparison in your head. But the comparison in your head is stopping you making work. It's stopping you wanting to engage with that social side online and sort of put it all in context. And that's a tragedy for you, not for him, for you, because there's work that's not coming into the world now. So I think you've got to, the way I describe it is you've got to think about it like a marathon, right? So if you're running a marathon, any marathon runner knows this. So I hear, I'm not a marathon runner, but so I hear, is that you've got to put a strategy together for your best race, right? And blinker yourself to what everyone else is doing. Because if you go, you know, knowing the race, I'm going to do the first quarter, I'm going to go quite gently and then sort of build up in the middle. The second quarter, third quarter, I'm going to slack it off a bit and leave a lot in the tank for the fourth quarter of that race. But then you stand at the start line and there's a guy in a red shirt next to you who's just set you off for some reason and annoyed you. And you go, forget it, I'm beating this guy. But his strategy is to go fast from that first quarter. You're going to use all your energy up and then you won't be able to utilize the strategy you design that's best for you. So the minute you start comparing your race or your work as a creative to what someone else is doing, you're not going to do your best work. You're not going to run your best race.
I am broadly smiling here because I've not run many races in my life. But when I was doing a bit of running, I did the Reading Half Marathon.
Nice.
And I've done it a couple of times. It's a particularly hilly one. Well, when I did it, kids, it was more difficult than it is these days. We didn't end at the Medeski Stadium anyway. We were all lined up. I saw one of those long caterpillars with all the legs underneath from the runners, and this big foam caterpillar. And I looked at them, and for some reason, I don't know why, it became a sort of strongly competitive thing in me that I thought, I'm gonna beat the bloody caterpillar if it's the only thing I can do. And we set off, and all exactly what you said. Everything went in terms of what I'd been told, how to run a half marathon, go easy at the start and so on. I pegged it. And I wasn't long, maybe a third the way around the course, I was easily beating the caterpillar at that stage. But about a third into the race, the caterpillar started coming up behind me very, very briskly, shot past me. And finished way, way, way before me. And when I got to the end, I remember saying to some friends, I said, that bloody caterpillar beat me. And they said, but you do know the bloody caterpillar had 10 guys underneath who were actually paras. They were paratroopers.
Yeah.
You were racing people that, you know.
SAS.
So you did make me laugh when you said that because the impossible question. How do you think the photography community can foster less comparison and a more genuine connection? Or am I lost in utopia here, perhaps?
No. Gosh, I hope not. I mean, that's what we've got to aim for, right? I think we have to stop blaming everybody else for a start. We have to stop blaming social media. We have to stop blaming other photographers. And you have to find your people and be intentional about community. You know, find them and I mean, I made a video a little while back saying we need more competition in photography, but the true definition of the word, because if you break it down, competere, the Latin petere means struggle, com means together. Competition means to struggle together, not against each other. I'm not trying to beat you. We're all on this journey together. It's tough for all of us to make anything that's meaningful or worthwhile or of any kind of quality. So why don't we struggle at our respective things together as a group? Why don't we find ways to connect with fellow photographers and creatives and say, I'm not trying to beat you or be better than you. Do you want to just meet and talk and in person if possible? And if not, on the internet's fine. You can build deep, meaningful relationships on the internet. You know, it's not a problem. It's how you use those tools. Don't let it be about numbers and likes and subscribers. Find your people and make that connection deeper and more meaningful. And I used to have a friend back in South Africa in my early 20s named Doug. And Doug and I, this was not to do with photography specifically, but Doug and I would meet on a Tuesday night every week for dinner for a good 4 or 5 years in there. And the deal, this is back kind of in our, kind of my very Christian days. And there's a psalm that talks about iron sharpening iron. That's what it's like when two people sort of meet together and sort of knock chips off each other. And we had this thing in our head of like, we're going to have dinner together every week and we're going to be able to say anything we want to each other because we know we care about each other, right? Anything. So if I feel like he's out of line in some decisions he's making in his life or he's off the track, I'm going to tell him. And I want him to do the same to me. And so those conversations where we gave each other permission to do that, we said some hard things to each other, but I never felt more uplifted. And I didn't grow as fast with another human being as from those conversations with my friend Doug. And I think you need to build those sorts of relationships at depth. It's what Simon and I have when we go and, have coffee on the moors, or my friend Joshua Jackson and I have when we're walking around doing street photography in London, talking for hours. It's those creative friendships where you're sharing your work with each other, your ideas with each other. You're telling each other where you're producing rubbish if you actually are, and you can do better than that. I know you. You're saying that because you can, because we know that actually we care about each other, and that's the only place it's coming from. There's no actual competition there. And invest in those friendships. I think that's the people you journey with.
That's scary for some people, though, isn't it? But it obviously worked for you very well.
But it's why it's important to choose people who you pass those two tests. Do they know what they're talking about? And do they really care about you and your journey? If they pass those two tests, then what they say doesn't have to be that painful. Because it might sound like a tough thing. Most days it's good things. It's not like you're always just saying you're rubbish. Like that'd be weird. It's most of the time they're saying, yes, this is great. I really like this. You should really stick at that. Keep going with it. And sometimes they're saying, no, I'm not sure about that one for you. I'm not sure it's going the right direction. They're not always right. You don't always have to take their word for it. But you can trust them when they say the good stuff, because if they felt something bad, they'd say it. So anything they say, you can take on board, and it's an honest mirror coming back at you about where you actually are with them.
And Sean returns very shortly with, inadequacy and self-doubt are the next two topics in our list of subjects today. If you'd like to feedback some thoughts about the show today, I'd love to hear from you. The email address is stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. If you're sending stories in terms of where you're adventuring with a camera, then I'd love to receive pictures as well. Please, if you can, try and resize them to 2,500 pixels wide. That's fantastic. If you can't, don't worry, send in the full res and I'll do the heavy lifting for you. And that's the same size, picture-wise that is, that you'll need for the one-word assignment, which I'm going to remind you of now. It's set by Lynn Fraser and Jackie Materchuk. They both had the same word this month, so as I said last week, I decided to include them both within this. Lynn Fraser, who is my co-conspirator when it comes to the Scottish retreats. Oh, Lynn, it would not have happened if you hadn't worked so hard on it. And we're into our 4th year of doing them now. It's been fantastic as an adventure in itself. And Jackie Materchuk, who was a guest a few weeks ago. So 2 more editions to take part in this one. We're just beginning to populate the assignments page. Good luck.
The Photo Walk assignment.
Okay, one word then. The one-word challenge, the assignment for this month. What words, Jackie, have you chosen?
I would have to say connection.
So why? And how does that connect to your work and how you approach your subjects?
For me, the connection comes with my subjects. And in order to create connection, I need to be invested in them. I need to understand them. I need to respect them. I need to know them. I think that would be an assignment I would be excited to see in a visual response is, what has made you feel connected? And that could be connected to them. It could be connected to the moment. It could be connected to a past experience, but something that really has stirred your soul, made you feel something deeply. And if you can turn that into a moment, a frozen frame, you're going to have an immense success and I think feeling of accomplishment just within your own world.
So my word is connection. It's a word that crops up frequently when we're talking about photography, and I think it's a word that's very open to interpretation. So you can look at it from a literal angle, or you can look at it from a metaphorical angle. And I think it's particularly pertinent in the last 2 weeks because we've made connections with new people on the retreat, which has been lovely. So my thoughts on the assignment were that you could maybe show a relationship between people and or an object or different objects, perhaps a spark between yourself as a photographer and the subject.
Can you think of one of yours? What's a connection picture that you can think back in the last year, maybe with all your trips you've done in various places?
I took an image of one of the girls when we went to visit the Arbori tribe, and she stared right down the lens of the camera, right into my soul. And I feel that's a really strong connection there that was formed between the two of us during that portrait.
Well, maybe we can use that one on the assignments page to demonstrate that perfectly.
Yeah.
So, once again, the word is...
connection.
Good luck. So, best of luck with this one. If you'd like to send in a picture to do with connection, then send them to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. No borders, no watermarks, please. Resize them to 2,500 pixels if you can. Otherwise, send in the full res. And don't forget to put in links so we can link back to your Instagram, your website, your blog, Flickr, whatever. Best of luck with that. What is it, pups? Oh, we need to move on, do we? Yes. Let's hear more then from my guest today, Sean Tucker, with the next part of our programme, which is about inadequacy and self-doubt.
So, inadequacy and self-doubt. I have got to come clean with something. I'm going to reveal something to you.
Oh.
The first time that you and I ever met was in Brighton. And you came down to, it was for the Fujicast podcast, yes. Actually, and you dropped me a line and you said, "Can I come down to it?" And I was, well, I still am, a huge follower of your work and really enjoy what you do. I always have. But when you sent me that email, I went into a bit of a tailspin of inadequacy feelings. Because I thought, I can't possibly let Sean come down to this because he's on a pedestal up there.
Oh, of course, no.
I'm somewhere down, and this might be uncomfortable hearing this, but that's how I was feeling. And then when you turned up, it was lovely. You were on the show, and everything went well. I think the show went well, and we all went for a meal. I remember I think it was something like a Lebanese restaurant or something. And you said, "Well, I'll come and sit next to you." And I thought, "Oh, no, don't do that."
I just want to be your friend, Neil. Why are you pushing me away?
Because I'm going to have to find interesting conversation, and you're far too bright to be sitting next to me. No. Now, all those thoughts went through I had a real sense of inadequacy, and I did go away that evening thinking, "Oh, I hope I didn't say something stupid."
You did? Do you want me to know what you said?
Are you going to be my Doug?
Yeah.
Inadequacy is something that has very much followed me around in my creative life, and it is an internal dialogue, and it's exhausting sometimes. How do you deal with it?
I mean, it is for me too. I have the same fears. I think one of the break points for me, and I've seen this quote in loads of different forms over the years. I think I can't peg any of them, but it's something like, you don't need to worry about how much everyone's thinking about you because they're just thinking about themselves. Like, most people are not concerned with whether how you're acting or how you're speaking or are you getting it right, because they're thinking exactly the same thing about themselves, and that's a full-time job. So the minute we realize how little other people care about what we're saying or what we're doing, it kind of takes the pressure off. We've got this kind of odd narcissism, I think, about we feel like everyone's observing us all the time and judging us. That's what we're telling ourselves, but it's just not true. And that gives you a lot of freedom to say, oh, I've got more freedom to experiment or try things or just be who I want to be and see what happens. And most people will never notice if I get it wrong. That kind of frees you up a little bit, realizing that most people don't care. But yeah, I mean, I think I've found some confidence over the years. It's taken time, and I think I've had to go through a journey of faking it, like everyone does at the start. When you don't really know who you are, you just kind of build a few personalities and try them out, and then you realize, no, those aren't true, and they're exhausting to try and keep up. And then you kind of go through this sort of, I suppose what spiritual traditions would call a dark night of the soul, where it all comes crumbling down and we're like, oh gosh, everything I built is a lie. And you kind of sit in this place where you're going, I don't know who I am anymore. A lot of people, that's kind of your very traditional midlife crisis, isn't it? Like, what am I even doing? Who even am I? Like, what have I built in this first half of my life? And then when you build things in that second half, you construct somebody like every brick I put back now has to be who I actually am. And has to be quieter, it has to be more true, it has to be less flashy, it has to be more honest. I think when you slowly start to do that, you get a more solid foundation and a more true confidence that's unshakable, because you know now you're not really trying to fake it for anybody. And that's a kind of a trajectory, I think, that follows for everybody, whether that's your personality or your creative journey. I think follows exactly the same sort of trajectory. So I think some of that process has started to happen for me, and I'm more comfortable with who I am now than I was in my 30s. And I was more comfortable then than I was in my 20s. And I know it just takes time now, and to be patient with yourself and allow that process to happen and just be more and more aware of it. I think that's a lot of what it comes down to. And also the fact that it's okay to be uncomfortable. Like, I'm always the person who leaves a party first, right? I'm always the one who's there for 45 minutes and sneaks out the back door because I just am uncomfortable there. Yeah. And I used to feel terrible about that. I used to feel guilty. Like, people must think things about me. They must think I'm what, and I suddenly realized no one even noticed I left. That's the truth. No one noticed.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, well, it's true, because often there's lots of people there. No one notices they're having a good time, right? Yeah. And I put all this like, oh, everyone will hate me and everyone will think I'm boring and everyone. But if I'm uncomfortable with something, I don't have to be there. If I'm uncomfortable in a situation, I don't have to do it, or I can admit that's how I feel and be comfortable in my discomfort. I can admit that's the way that it is. It's all just growing up, isn't it? It's all just getting to know who you are and being more and more kind of okay with that.
I've linked inadequacy with self-doubt. Does it affect some more than others? Is it again this trope almost?
I would be worried about you if you didn't experience self-doubt. I think it's probably just a completely uncalibrated ego or a narcissist, and you're lying to yourself, because we all have doubts about the things we make. If we don't doubt it, we're not pushing the boat out far enough. We're playing it too safe. So we should doubt our work if we're trying to be brave with it, I think. So dealing with that is normal. Yes, some people really battle with it more than others. And I think that's where it's the mental game. It's deciding things like, what's this emotion I'm feeling around self-doubt? Is it just, oh, I'm not sure about it, and I'm not sure I feel about it, and I want to do it for a bit longer and make it perfect, and then I'll release it later. That's its own battle. Or is it like uncalibrated terror and anxiety and, oh gosh, I'm shaking, I can't deal with this? That's time to talk to somebody about that. And again, like, no shame around that. Mental health is like physical health. Like, if I have tennis elbow, right? There's no shame around that. It just is what it is. It's time to go and get some help and decide how you can better deal with that so you can be healthier and live a good life. If that's the case, admit it sooner than later, and then get back to what the actual thing you're fighting is. Take all the kind of emotional intensity around what you're dealing with down a notch by talking to someone who's a licensed therapist, or by getting the medication that you need, and then get back to, yes, I still feel a bit underconfident, but now it's manageable and I can talk myself into going a bit longer and sharing a bit more work and doing it bit by bit. I think we have to separate out the kind of the very strong emotional responses to the actual problem, which is just, sometimes we're not sure if something we made is good. And that's completely normal.
I think in a couple of weeks' time, I'm not even sure whether I'm supposed to say this, and perhaps I'll edit this out of the the final program, just in case it feels like I'm dropping a name with a huge clang or something. But a friend of mine, I say a friend, more of an acquaintance really. I've not seen him for a fair while now. But I worked with somebody called Paul McKenna when I was in the BBC, and of course he's gone on to do amazing things around the globe. He started doing his hypnotic show, and it was very much an entertainment thing. And then he used it to help people, and he's helped people, CEOs, all sorts of people. And I'm smiling slightly because I'm thinking, where we round this question off and everything comes back in a circle, I'm thinking, oh God, I hope he doesn't sit next to me at the meal. I'm back to my Sean Tucker.
What is that? What is that for you? Do you what's the fear?
I don't know. I mean, that feeling of, I will bleep these words out, but I'm going to say it because it's the way I feel it. It's the, what the f*** have I done with my life compared to you? We're back to comparison anxiety, aren't we? Eh?
So, but here's the thing. So I'll tell you about, like, it's your head that does that, right? It's not reality, because I'll be honest with you, when I came down to the Fujicast thing in Brighton to come hang out and honestly, I just did it to get a bit of community because I was a bit bored and lonely at that stage, right? And I thought, yeah, I really like what Neil and what Kev are doing, and they seem like nice guys, and I'd love to go hang out with them and meet them. I was excited to meet you, and I was very nervous. I was like, I don't know these people. They've got this podcast. Their crowd's going to be there. That's their audience. Who the hell am I to come and pitch up at an event that's nothing to do with me, really? So I'm in my head on the other end of that, thinking a lot of the same things you are, and neither of us are right, right? We're both wrong. We're both like worried about something that's not really true. And when we say it, look back on it, it does seem silly. So that's the lesson, isn't it? Like when those things come up in the now, don't believe them, because someone's sitting over a table from you, you might think they're a big deal, but they're just like, I'm just a person. I'm just doing my thing and you're doing your thing. And it's nice to meet somebody and have an intellectual, like, interesting conversation with somebody. And you can have that with anybody. So we have to get out of our own heads, I think, and stop being so mean to ourselves and telling ourselves we're just rubbish and why would anyone talk to me? It's too much. It's overcalibrated. We have to call ourselves on it. Yeah?
And Sean returns soon to the show. Look who we found. Now, when I say that, I'm assuming that you may have heard the Extra Mile edition before this one. If you haven't, this will make no sense at all. He features on the Extra Mile today. Ken, you had quite it almost turned into a fishing cast. Ken by the bank. Fishing by the bank.
Off the lakes today because it was a bit slow.
Yeah.
In fact, it was a non-starter. Oh. So I sat down there for about 2 hours, 3 hours, and then came over.
Hold on, sorry, Ken. He's going for your sausage roll. Get out the way, you.
You want my sausage roll?
Yeah, Barney, you can't have a sausage roll. You stay there. Sit. Don't interrupt. I'm talking to Ken.
Yeah. Anyway, so I decided to make my way round to the river here.
Yeah.
First cast, a nice bream of about 4 pounds.
Oh, nice.
And then we hooked something and it was fighting away and it went in these canes at the side here and it come unhooked. A bit disappointing. Could have been a trout, could have been a chub. But then we had a couple of minnows and a roach and that's basically been it. And other than that, it's been sycamore leaves.
Right, yeah, sycamore leaves. You won't.
And an ash branch.
And a what? An ash branch?
Ash branch, yeah.
You're not going to feed much on that tonight, are you?
No, I'm not.
No, you're not. Save your sausage roll.
Bird watching's been interesting.
Oh, you've been watching birds?
Oh, yeah, I always watch the birds go by. I had a cormorant fly right past in front of me.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was a juvenile. But the kingfisher I heard on the lake, it got light this morning. And other than that, it's been pretty quiet. Oh, I had a sparrowhawk sat over on the wires there and a kestrel flew past twice because you don't see many kestrels.
No, you don't. You see a lot of wildlife as you're sitting. I'm going to take a picture of you if that's all right, Ken. Can I do a portrait? It's my Ken portrait. Now, do you know, it's funny, it's like buses. Once I bumped into Ken the other day, and you'll hear our recording with Ken on the Extra Mile today. But now we've met Ken once, we'll meet him twice, 3 times, 4. Oh, he's caught something. What have you got, Ken?
A crayfish, I believe.
How do you know it's a crayfish?
Because it's not bloody fighting.
Oh, right. Oh, they don't fight?
No, it's not.
No, it's not. What is it?
Oh, it's a signal.
Oh.
It's a signal.
Well, it looks like a crayfish. Hold on. Hold that there. Let me get a picture.
That is a signal crayfish.
Are these the American ones?
Yeah, and it's a female.
Can I get a close shot without it pincing me?
Yeah.
Now, you're supposed to destroy this, aren't you?
As I have a licence for them, I can remove them and I will put them in my holding cages.
Right. Oh, one of her pincers has gone, been damaged. Right. Why are they... Come away, Barnes, come away. Why are they bad in our rivers?
Because basically, they destroyed the banks. They wiped out the native crayfish,
Yeah.
the white claws. Because when we was kids back in the 60s, so you know how ancient I am now, there used to be loads of them. And it's me robbing. And
No, pups, leave. Ken, I'm going to leave you fishing here because Barney otherwise is going to end up with a crayfish in his mouth. It's lovely to see you.
yeah, is that another boat coming?
Another boat coming. Bring your lines in. Good luck.
Good luck, yeah, and you.
Yeah, I'll be round your place for cod and chips. Can you catch me a cod?
Not here, but I've got a salmon before.
Oh, well, salmon, that would be nice. Like it with lemon, please. Bit of parsley. That was Ken. I know it was, Neil. You were calling him Ken. Met him the other day when I was recording The Extra Mile with Duncan Ferguson. So I just sort of, I saw his rod just sticking out from behind the bushes. You saw it as well, didn't you, pups? Yeah. All right, Sean Tucker. It's the Sean interview, not the Ken interview. But Sean returns to talk about fear of failure and undervaluing accomplishment. So this letter from Mark Christensen was very, very timely indeed. From Mark, and I will link to his super photographic work on the show page today, in particular, your exceptionally strong music work, the live stage work. Oh, just so good. Full of energy, bursting with energy. From Mark, you mentioned your upcoming interview, and I thought I'd write some thoughts down about undervaluing your work. I think that what many, including myself, tend to forget is that we're all different. We all have different places in life. If we were all the same, our human existence wouldn't have achieved very much. Also, we're all at different places or stages in our lives. When I first started in photography here in the US, wedding photographers were making a huge push, with some people getting paid tens of thousands of dollars just to shoot one wedding. I think some still are. I really wanted to be one of them, but I wasn't one of them. I didn't have the charm or the money or the it that makes some way more successful than others. That's a show on the X Factor, all of its own, isn't it? But my life had taken crazy twists and turns to get to where it was then. Fast forward to now, my life went through even more crazy transformations to get here. So here I am, 56 years old, and I feel like I'm starting as a new photographer. I've been back in the saddle professionally now for 2 years. My business, though, is still a baby. That being said, the older I get, the wiser I get, and realise that what's more important to me than likes on social media and kudos filled with emptiness is providing for my family. Making sure my clients love my work. After all, they're the ones writing the check. Likes on social media and tens of thousands of followers doesn't necessarily mean you're making money and supporting your family. Amen to that, Mark. Followers can be bought on the open market. I want to make an impact and make people happy and support my family, and because of that, I have great value. Do my sons and my wife love me? Yes. Then I have value. Do my clients love my work? Yes. Then I have value. And I think that's a perfect letter to go into this final part of the show today.
Right, the last two. Sean, we're on the home straight now. Fear of failure and undervaluing accomplishments. I mean, let's end with a big one, or two big ones. Okay, how do you define failure in the context of your creative journey? What does being a failure actually mean?
For me now, it's very simple. Being a failure is not making the work. That's the failure. I would rather make bad work and try than not make it at all now. But that's not how I've always thought. I think being a perfectionist, failure for me was not doing something that had mistakes in it was failure to me.
Yeah.
But I now really believe that, done is better than perfect thing. And the only way I can fail is not to try it and not to put it out. That's the difference. And I try to keep it that simple because that to me then clears up the perfectionism argument for me. It's the worst case scenario would be not to hit live on that video. Whereas before I would have been the worst case scenario is to release a video and have people notice mistakes in it. I might feel that way, But I don't believe that now. And the logic gets to take over now. I deliberately push the logic to the fore. And I know that failure is not making the work I want to make.
This might sound a strange question, but can there be value in failing?
I think we learn far more through mistakes than through successes, if that's what you mean. Like, I think I learn a lot more every time I make a mistake. I mean, I do it this week. When I'm editing this video that I'm editing this week, there's a few things that I didn't do right in terms of exposure or in terms of lighting something. There's a few shots in there I cringe. I'm like, oh gosh, I really should have taken an extra 10 minutes to light that properly. But now I know I'll never make that particular mistake again. I'll be like, no, you'll take that 10 minutes and you know how you would have lit it now. I've got a lesson I learned by doing something wrong that I've logged away. And then I've got more lessons because I have to try and rescue that shot now in post, which is not the way you need to do it.
No.
And I have to work out, okay, I'm literally Googling going, okay, how am I in DaVinci Resolve? How can I grade this so it looks better? How can I bring up some highlights? How can I shape a bit of light that's not really there, but so it still looks natural and realistic? How can I do that? I've learned a whole new bag of tricks in the editing side of things because of a mistake I made with the camera. If I did it well and made no mistakes, and again, like if I shot something well that I didn't do consciously, but it just worked out, I learned nothing, right? But if I make a mistake, I've learned not just how to light something better, how to take more time, and how to edit something better in the future, new tricks all over the place from one mistake. I mean, that's valuable. That's invaluable to me.
Well, it moves on to undervaluing accomplishments now. I think I do sometimes. But do you?
I know you do.
Yeah, this was supposed to turn into a counselling session.
No.
Do you find it difficult to celebrate your accomplishments? I know I have in the past. I use this sort of I call it the sofa of flattery, which I hide behind. If somebody says something nice to me, I make out that I'm hauling this. It's a red velvet sofa in my mind, and I'm hauling this behind me, and I'll hide behind it if anybody says, that was good, I enjoyed that, you should do that more. Maybe that's a British thing, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's very cultural. Because like I said, going over to America recently and doing talks, there is a different culture around compliments and admitting your accomplishments. It felt like a lot of people I spoke to, they put their accomplishments front and center in the conversation. This is what I've done. This is my business card. These are my images. These are the work that I'm doing. Like it's very like trying to impress forward. Everything's a bit markety, and we don't do that as much. You know, we're quite like, I've done some things, but you have to come get them from me. I'll tell them about you if you get me in a corner, and I'll whisper them to you. Do you know what I mean? We were a little bit more circumspect with that. But I'm trying to get better at admitting what I'm good at when it comes up. Because I can be more on the self-deprecating side. Oh, I'm only all right with that. Yeah. There's a balance here as well, isn't there, between showing off about something, but also being too self-deprecating. And I'm trying to find that middle line where I'm sober about what I actually do well, and that I'll readily tell you. I'm not gonna sit you down and bore you with it. But if the conversation comes up and you ask me, I'm going to tell you that I'm good at that, and I'll tell you some of my experiences or stories around it. But where it hits me is I've realized that I'm so tough on myself that I need that balance. I have to have that antidote to that part of my brain that goes, you're rubbish, you keep making mistakes. I have to go back and say, is that true? Am I making as many mistakes as I feel like I'm making? And I found an interesting thing that if I go view older work, the further back it goes, the kinder I am about it for some reason. And I think
that's interesting. Maybe
it's because the more distance I get from my own work, the more I feel I can give myself permission to compliment it as if it's somebody else. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm not allowed to compliment myself because that's arrogant, right? Is this lie I tell myself in my head. But I can easily compliment something that's like, that's me 7 years ago. It's not really me anymore. You know, we're a whole new human being by now, so it doesn't count. And I think like, if that's true, then my own thoughts about how many mistakes I'm making now are uncalibrated and they're too much. So I need to take them slightly less seriously. Still try to do the very best work I can do, but far more be willing to say, this is actually mostly good. I can't let the 1 or 2 mistakes in this video or this set of images be the reason I view the whole thing as negative. I have to say, no, it's mostly good. And then deliberately go back through my journey and go, that was a great moment. That was a great film. That was a great image that I took there. That was a real success point. And then see the growth through it all. Like how much better my images have gotten over the last 10 years, how much better my videos have gotten over the last 7 years, how much better my writing's gotten over the last while. That has to be celebrated because it gets me out of, I'm just making a mistake today, and puts that tiny mistake I made today in the context of, but everything in the overall is getting better and better all the time.
There was a broadcaster, there is a broadcaster called Danny Baker. I remember listening to him on, is it Desert Island Discs? I love that show. What a simple idea that I wish I'd have had in 1950 whatever, when I wasn't even born. But I remember him saying there's nothing worse than false modesty. It's a really unattractive thing, he said. If somebody asks me, are you good at something, I'll tell them I am.
I mean, I think that on both sides of it, false modesty and arrogance are both equally unattractive to me. So it's about finding that middle road. It's about saying, I'm not going to pretend I'm bigger or better than I am, but I am going to be honest with you about what I do well, and I'm not going to shy away from saying that if it comes up. I'm going to be proud of that, not arrogant about it, but proud of it. You know, it took me years and years to get this good at particular things. It took me blood, sweat, and tears to really hone my craft. And yes, if you ask me about it, I will say, yeah, I'm pretty good at this particular thing. I'm great with a camera in my hand. Yes, if you want a photograph taken of you right now, no matter what the conditions, I could probably do a pretty good job. And that's a skill. I don't look down on that. That's taken me a long time to get here, and that's worth celebrating.
And my thanks to Sean Tucker for helping us with these subjects that we've had today, these topics that we've had today. I did suggest that was the final part of the show, at the start of the segment that you've just heard, that is. And, well, it was the final part in terms of the topics. And I do hope there's been some important takeaways from our chat today. And I'd be very, very interested, genuinely, to receive your thoughts to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. And if you're sending in some pictures as well, then I'd love to receive those. Tell me about where you photograph. Tell me about your photographic life. And I know it's an overused word, but I'll use it. It's the J word. It's the journey word. Yes, your journey as a photographer and as a creative. Now, there's no why today. There's no why question, which I know is a bit unusual. I like to finish with a why, but we don't have one today. But there is an and finally part of my conversation with Sean, and here it is.
Well, one final question. Thank you for answering these. I've really appreciated our time having a chat about this together. And it's a personal question. Mm-hmm. Again, has there been a milestone or milestones in your career that in hindsight, Sean, you wish you'd appreciated more?
Had a long pause now.
Was that because you're building a long list?
No, not at all. I wish the answer was yes. I don't. You see, I'm telling you, like, to celebrate your successes, and I realize when you ask that, I still don't do it enough. I don't sit and think about those sort of milestone moments. I try and put it into context of the whole journey, and maybe I make a mistake doing that. Maybe they should be celebrated individually more often. I mean, maybe it's more to do with things I've been involved with. It's not even to do, for me, I think, with anything I did on my own. Like, I'm really proud of the community that I was part of in London in terms of street photographers and the exhibitions we were willing to put on together, of which, by the way, I was a minor part. But something about that, I feel like I should have been paying attention more at the time and saying that my work is good enough to sit alongside photographers I really, really respect, and I get to rub shoulders with them, and we're part of a community together. That happened twice, and I feel like I missed that. I didn't stop and go, that's something I should have taken a moment and sat somewhere and gone, that's a really good moment in your journey. I think things like that are really good. Things like, I guess, finally releasing a book into the world, which I think came about at a time where I was just feeling angry about it at the time because so much had gone wrong with the release. I missed that, it was COVID time and loads of other stuff, and it kind of just sort of snuck out there, and I didn't market it enough either. I didn't stand by it enough at the time. Like, I picked it up later, but I was almost just mixed feelings about it, and I didn't celebrate it until later, and that was a mistake. And yeah, I guess the videos as well. Like, I can look back now and see videos I made that cost me a lot to make personally at the time because of how much I had to dig and get honest about it, but I can see the responses to those videos and what it meant to people then. And because I was already moving on to the next video, I didn't take a second to stop and celebrate. Wow, that meant something. And you doing that was a really good thing, because there's people who've given you their stories back and what that meant to them at that point. And making that kind of difference in somebody's life with a piece of art is what the whole thing is about. And I suppose little things like that has taught me to pay more attention, to not do this kind of retroacting, like celebrating 5-10 years down the track. Do it just after you've made something good. Every time you make something good, stop, make yourself a cup of tea, sit on a chair, go, that was a job well done.
Oh, Pops, look down here, look. There we go, there's some more water, look. Wash your feet, clean your legs. And you won't look like you've... Oh, look at him. Hey, you won't look like you've covered yourself in mud. You look like you've been down at the watering hole. My sincere thanks today to Sean Tucker. It would not have been possible to make this show without him. Taking away all my self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and all the other topics we talked about in terms of having knowledge about these subjects that we've talked about today, I really think it would not have been the same had Sean not been helping me to make this programme. So thank you, Mr. Tucker. Thank you very much. And that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and want to walk a little further together, then the Extra Mile edition 114 is waiting for you. The Extra Mile is part of our Patreon channel, supported by our wonderful community that we call Extra Milers. There's an extra show each week which features our community often as stars of the show. And this week, that is certainly what's happening. And you heard Ken already as well. He's on there too. This week, Extra Miler Duncan Ferguson joins me. Not the footballer, Neil. No, not the footballer. No, the photographer, the explorer, the storyteller. We went for a walk and we recorded our thoughts. Yeah, Duncan popped round to my neck of the woods, as it were, and we just we walked along these paths. Actually, we take a real, it's a meander as we discuss policing, riot police. I think we discussed that. Trekking with a camera, landing at the most dangerous airport in the world, and being off-grid in a truck with a tent on its roof.
On this week's Extra Mile.
But it is on a hill, so you fly through the mountains, which is scary enough because of the weather. Low cloud and all that kind of stuff, so you can't even see where you're going. And then, you land uphill, and the uphill part is partly because of the lay of the land and partly because that's how it helps you stop. And then there's a wall at the other end, there's a mountain.
The first 5 minutes of the show is available for free, so click on the link on the website for the Extra Mile, and if you join us, you also get a chance to be a part of the InVision show that we have each month, the Zoom show that happens on the first Tuesday of the month. PS to the show is to come, but before that we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to or think about what's been said today. And I really went in search of a song that could suit the theme of today, and I found this by Echo LaRue. It's called Trust Myself, and some of the themes, or some of the lines really within the song, seemed perfect. I want to trust myself, love myself, believe in myself, be enough for myself. This is Echo LaRue.
Wish I could wear peace like this shirt on my back, then give it away whenever somebody asks. Every time I try, I catch myself reaching for it from someone else. Why is it so hard to hold on to? Maybe I'm obsessed with a hurried rush. Whenever I slow down, I beat myself up. So much time I'm worrying what could be or what I might have been, second guessing every move I make. I wanna trust myself, love myself, believe in myself like I used to. Game a has changed, that I'll do it all wrong. Part of my heart's grown cold within, gotta find a way to feel the heat again, but I don't know where to begin. Oh, I wanna trust myself, love myself, believe in myself like I used to. I wanna trust myself, be enough for myself, ring my own bell like I used to. I'm gonna trust myself. Oh, oh, I'm gonna love myself. I'm gonna trust myself, love myself, believe in myself like I used to. I'm gonna trust myself, be enough for myself, ring my own bell like I used to.
And I'm more comfortable with who I am now than I was in my 30s. And I was more comfortable then than I was in my 20s. And I know it just takes time now. Every time you make something good, stop, make yourself a cup of tea, sit on a chair, go, that was a job well done.
That's Echo LaRue and Trust Myself. Just a few closing thoughts before the postscript, the PS today. My sincere thanks to you. If you are or you're about to become an extra miler, we'll keep building this wonderful community of kindness in the photographic and walking world together. A safe place to share our thoughts each week about this thing that we love, photographing and walking, and the mental health benefits that come from it, which has been very much a part or a theme of today's show. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell, who looks after our Facebook members. Right, a postscript for the show. Now, today it's from Mally Davis. Yes, he of the trees, a good friend of mine, a good friend of the show as well. We were having a little messenger chat as I was preparing the letters for this show, and packing the bag to come out and make this walk. And I thought, wouldn't it be good if we had some words from Mally on this one? I asked him if he'd give me some thoughts about self-belief, and I gave him absolutely no time to think about it. I said, say the first words that come to mind, say it into a microphone and send it. And he was good for his word, because he did it straight away. And I like this, sending on a note of positivity for the future. So as Mally, who makes the most beautiful pictures of trees and woodland and street even, as he launches his new website, which I will link to, as he looks to turning his absolute passion into an absolute career in terms of photography, here are some thoughts from the fork in the road that he's personally navigating about self-belief.
The moment we think and consider what our actions are, the moment doubt can creep in. I find action to make, to create, to do, and don't think is the path to a positive action, to a self-belief without being tricked by yourself, but tricking yourself to believe you can do anything.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.